everybody. Welcome to the show. Around the nation, right here, TYT Nation. I'm Jeff Waldorf. Man, got a good show today. A lot of stuff happening. We're going to talk about Trump Care. Trump Care. As if it's not bad enough. That should be a slogan. So, yeah, we've got Trump Care. We're going to talk about that. We got a disastrous story on, of course, African Americans being in prison. But my favorite story of the day is how Donald Trump reacted over the weekend. So I didn't get to that story yesterday because a little bit of an involved story, and it would take Ron and I about a half hour to an hour just to dissect all the parts of it. And we got Ben Carson calling slaves immigrants. That's fun. And then, of course, we've got a minimum wage story that I promised last week. So we're going to do all that today. So there's your breakdown. Before I get into the rest of the show, I want to thank everybody, of course, for being patrons. Patreon.com/TYTNation. I want to thank all you guys and gals for helping keep this show independent and non-corporate sponsored. So thank you, thank you, thank you. You're all awesome. And those who do not, who are not patrons, get to it. Get to it. And if you can't, don't worry about it. Share this video, like our videos, subscribe if you haven't already. That also helps us immensely. So, thank you. All right. Anyway, interesting stuff happening today. And actually really, really interesting stuff that I'm not going to cover today, but I want to cover tomorrow, and that is the Vault 7. So, if you haven't heard, WikiLeaks just released a whole bunch of CIA files on some of the different stuff. What I want to do is I'm going to take tomorrow. I'm going to look over it. I'm going to really kind of try to study it tonight, catch it myself up so that I can break it down for you guys tomorrow. So Vault 7, look forward to tomorrow. But again, today's show is still going to be very, very good. So I think you're all going to like it. Now, let's start out with Trump Care. That's the big story of the day, and we'll dive into it. I'll tell you all about Trump Care. We'll break it down. We'll see who it benefits and who it does not benefit. All right. At last, the GOP has finally unveiled their long-awaited Obamacare replacement, or at least one of them. This is one of several bills that's actually floating around, but this is actually getting major attention. Now, this plan is called the American Health Care Act. Well, who would be against the American Health Care Act? I love their Orwellian naming on this. Like, just like they name everything, American or freedom or whatever. Well, we're going to break down and see whether or not it covers all Americans. Now, according to the New York Times, this is one of the two bills, actually, drafted by separate House committees. The government would no longer, and this is getting into specifics of this bill, it would no longer have a individual mandate. So already getting into the policy details, that individual mandate, gone. Okay. So individual mandate, of course, that would make a lot of people happy. A lot of people are very, very angry about the individual mandate. They're like, hey, we don't want to be forced to pay for health insurance. Especially health insurance that we might not need. Well, I've explained it on the show before that you would have some issues if you eliminate the individual mandate, and I've explained that in other videos. Now, what this would also do is that this bill would allow insurers to impose a surcharge of 30% for those people who have a gap between their health care plans. Well, that's a little bit of a disaster. Because basically, what they're saying is that if you drop coverage for any reason, or if you are dropped from an insurance company plan and are not covered for any point in time during the year and apply for new insurance, well, these companies, by law, would be able to charge you 30% extra for just signing up for insurance. Well, that seems a little disastrous, especially for those who might have lost their insurance through no fault of their own, such as being not able to afford the premiums for a specific insurance plan or company. I mean, because right now, and then if this gets enacted into law, well, insurance companies will be able to jack up their rates at any time they want to. And as we know, one of the big problems with the ACA, and even before the ACA, is rising rates for premiums. Well, now, if you try to get an insurance plan with a lower rate, if you couldn't afford your rate before, well, you're going to get hit with that 30% surcharge. So that's a disaster. Now, the legislation would also preserve two of the most popular features of Obamacare. Now, what is that? Well, one of them is letting young adults stay in their parents' health plan until age 26. And also, they did leave in the pre-existing conditions clause of that. So, insurance companies cannot drop you for having a pre-existing condition. You have to have coverage. You can't be denied. Now, interestingly enough, inside of this healthcare plan, for some reason, they decided to go after Planned Parenthood. Planned Parenthood? What the hell? What this would do is that it would make Planned Parenthood ineligible for Medicaid reimbursements or federal planning grants. So immediately, right in here, I mean, it's sort of unrelated. We're going to stick something in here that goes after Planned Parenthood. Because fuck you, that's why. Fascinating. Now, what it also does is that it lifts taxes that Obamacare had imposed on wealthy people, insurers, and prescription drug manufacturers, and replaces the subsidies for a tax credit that benefits younger, healthier people, and will actually raise premiums for people who are older. Make no mistake, this bill actually hoses the elderly. And so let me get into the specifics here. Now, under Obamacare, insurers could only charge elderly people 3 times more than younger policyholders. This bill, however, would widen that band from 3-to-1 to 5-to-1, meaning that, as an example, adults aged 60 to 64 would actually see their annual premiums go up by an average of 22%, or nearly $3,200, to nearly $18,000, according to a study by the Millman actuarial firm on behalf of the AARP. Now, those in their 50s would be hit with a 13% increase, or just $1,500, and pay an annual premium of $12,800. So immediately, you have older people, 50s and their 60s, getting hosed by this. Well, you're going to have to pay more. Fascinating. It's interesting because you have a lot of GOP voters that are actually older. So, now not only that, but the GOP plan doesn't provide those same people as generous of tax credits as Obamacare did. For example, a 60-year-old making $40,000 would get about $4,000 from the Republican plan in tax credits, not as a subsidy. Now, what they got before, in the ACA, they got an average subsidy of $6,750, according to the same Kaiser study. Now, the plan also, in addition to going after old people, also goes after poor people. According to CNN Money, the American Health Care Act would end the enhanced federal Medicaid funding for new enrollees starting in the year of 2020. Now, those already in the program, they say, could stay in as long as they remain continuously insured. But if they're dropped at all from the Medicaid plan, you cannot re-enroll. So once you're out, you're out. You're done. Now, that essentially means the end of the Medicaid expansion as we know it. And of course, there are a lot of GOP governors in certain states, Ohio, for example, that are going, whoa, 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 hey, whoa, you guys, you should not get rid of Medicaid. I mean, Ohio Governor John Kasich is one of the most fervent proponents of the Medicaid expansion because, look, Medicaid expansion essentially means that right now, the government pays about 100% of Medicaid cost to the states. Now, that was scheduled to go down to 90%, but ultimately, it's a really, really good deal for the states. And now, Donald Trump, under Trump Care, saying, nope, let's get rid of that. Like, no, we're not going to get any. We're going to get some federal funding to the states, but not nearly as much. So your Medicaid program, we're not going to fund that anymore to the tune that we've been funding it. And I'll get to that in a minute. Now, The problem is, of course, what you have here. In addition to the end of the Medicaid expansion, which, as I said, a lot of GOP governors are actually against, the ones that have actually expanded Medicaid into their states, you also have the way that they fund Medicaid being changed. And you know what that means? They're going to change it into a block grant. Basically, what's going to happen is that the states are going to end up paying for what the block grant doesn't cover. That means you're going to have a lot of cuts. You're going to have a lot of people drop from the Medicaid rolls. Now, Medicaid right now serves about 70,000 people across the country. And these are in states that have expanded Medicaid. There are a lot of states that are under Republican rule that would not expand Medicaid to the poor. So right now you're seeing 70,000 people that are going to be dropped. So absolute disaster. This is, of course, is going to hurt poor adults, low-income children, women, senior citizens, and the disabled. So again, if you're poor, if you're old, you are getting screwed over by this. Basically, everybody that the GOP isn't interested in helping anyway gets fucked. Now, in other videos, I've talked about what would happen if you eliminate the individual mandate and the taxes on the wealthy that fund the subsidies. Because again, the individual mandate helped pay for some of the other stuff. It's interesting to note that this was released without any sort of analysis or scoring by the CBO. Meaning, they don't know how to pay for the stuff that actually is in there. They don't know how to pay for these tax credits. Very, very interesting. And actually very, very telling. Now, let's talk about the subsidies or the tax credits, right? Now, basically, this would eliminate the subsidies and replace it with a less generous tax credit based on not age, but on income alone. For example, somebody making $20,000 a year would end up taking the biggest hit on any age under the GOP plan. A recent Kaiser study found that a 27-year-old would only get $2,000 instead of $3,225 under Obamacare on average, while a 40-year-old would get about $3,000 versus nearly $4,150 under the ACA. So again, what you're doing is that you're sticking it to the poor and old people. Ironically, older people, as I mentioned, tend to vote more Republican, and if that passes, they're going to be the ones that see the sharpest increases in premiums and even less help from the government. Now, the reason, of course, that older people get so much help under the ACA is because older people get sicker and their treatments become more expensive and medications. And it's also why healthier, younger people were needed in the health insurance market to help pay for this. That's why we needed the mandate. This law, of course, completely upends the whole thing because now more benefits go to younger people. And I'm going to lay those out. In fact, people in their 20s are the biggest winners here in this Republican plan. So long, of course, as you're not poor. Enrollees aged 20 to 29 would save about $700 a year to $4,000 on average, according to the Millman study for the AARP. Those under 30 would actually get a refundable tax credit of up to $2,000 to offset the cost of their premiums, as long as their income does not exceed $215,000 for an individual, which most younger people, they're not making $215,000 a year unless you're like Mark fucking Zuckerberg or something. And the GOP tax credits will also likely be more generous than Obamacare subsidies for younger people. For example, a 27-year-old making $40,000 a year would receive $2,000 under the GOP plan, but only gets a $103 subsidy from Obamacare on average. And since this bill loosens regulations on what could be considered insurance, i.e. the return of cheap junk insurance plans, means that healthier people will have the option of saving more money by buying insurance that doesn't really cover anything. It's basically insurance in name only. Now, for a younger person who doesn't really give a fuck, that might seem smart. Hey, I'm going to save some money. All right, I'm going to be covered. I'm going to save some money. Fantastic. It's smart until, I don't know, something happens like you get sick or, get cancer or something. And then you're like, oh, fuck. I didn't realize this insurance covered dick. It's almost like wearing a fig leaf instead of pants. I didn't know it didn't cover my cock. You mean it's been hanging out there the whole time? I didn't notice. It was cheaper. So that's a disaster. So it might seem like it benefits younger people this way, but it actually doesn't. It's actually not good comprehensive insurance. So that's a problem. But of course, Republicans are like, well, hey, man, that's a risk. Hey, if you get sick or cancer, you're on your own, dude. Trump care. USA, USA, USA. Now, it's also not going to be any surprise to anybody who watches the show and pays attention to what's going on to see that higher income Americans will also benefit greatly from this law. I already mentioned that taxes on the wealthy would be used to, or that were used to fund the subsidies, are no longer part of this bill, being replaced, of course, by tax credits. But one of the reasons that I mentioned earlier that CBO didn't score this is because, well, I mean, they didn't have time before they released it, but also it's going to probably get a negative score because they don't know how to pay for the tax subsidies that they're going to give everyone else. Because they just got rid of the taxes on the rich. They're not part of this. For example, nearly everybody in the top 1% who earn more than $774,000 a year would actually get a very hefty tax cut, averaging about $33,000, according to the Nonpartisan Tax Policy Center. Those in the 0.1% would get an average tax cut of $197,000. Not only that, but there's the addition of health savings accounts. Now, health savings accounts, of course, will allow people to put money away for their health insurance expenses tax-free. Well, who does that benefit? That benefits very wealthy people who are able to put this money into these accounts in the first place. Now, of course, poor people and, middle-class people, regular people, everybody will have access to a health savings account. The same access as a wealthy person. However, having access to something doesn't necessarily mean that you can have it. Doesn't necessarily mean that you can afford it or do anything about it. So that's the issue. A rich person could probably put away like $100,000 a month or whatever, a couple of months, and be fine. If they run in, they get cancer, well, they have all that money put away tax-free. Somebody who's middle class, somebody who's poor, might only be able to afford to put $50 away a month or a week into their health savings account. And then the same thing happens to them. They get cancer. They are 100% and completely royally fucked. So that's what's going on here. I mean, yes, just because you have access to something does not mean that you can use it or afford it. Again, I have access to a Maserati. It doesn't mean I can fucking drive one. Doesn't mean I can afford it. And of course, finally, this law is another big giveaway to health insurance companies. Now, let me explain. Obamacare allowed insurance companies to deduct $500,000 of their executive pay as a business expense. Basically like, oh, well, I gave our CEO, $3 million in compensation because they did such a fantastic job. I can deduct about $500,000 and consider that a business expense. Fantastic. Now, the GOP bill, however, would eliminate that limitation. Basically, if Aetna pays their CEO millions of dollars, $3 million in executive compensation, this bill would allow that company to try to deduct that from their tax bill. That, in effect, when you think about it, is a subsidy from us to Aetna. We would essentially be paying in our taxes, because they would not be paying their taxes, for their CEO bonus. And that's what's going on here. So, look, what we know now from this plan is that if you are young, you are healthy, and you are wealthy, or you're an insurance corporation, because corporations are people, well, you're going to be doing very, very well under this particular plan. Now, there are some Republicans that are looking at this, and this is one of them is Rand Paul, who said, whoa, this plan sucks because you're too generous with your tax breaks. You are too generous. So this is what's happening. Disaster, man. You are not winning with the American Health Care Act. Unless, of course, you were one of those very, very wealthy, very privileged, very young people, in that case, you were winning very, very much with this plan. And if you're not, sad day for you. Trump care. Okay. So, and again, on this is what we know so far. This hasn't been analyzed or scored by the CBO. And also, there's still a lot of details that they haven't gone over to how this works. This is what we know now. And I'm expecting it to be, ironically, one of those deals where it's like, you're not going to know what's in it until we pass it. I could see it. Okay. So let's go from this and let's talk about our snowflake president. Now, President Trump continues to be having a very, very difficult time adapting to the White House and has been reportedly taking it out on his staff. Now, there are several different sources for the leaks coming out of the White House. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to go and I'm going to start out with Politico, and then I'm going to go from there. Now, according to the sources that talk to Politico within the administration, Donald Trump has become increasingly frustrated over the Jeff Sessions recusal into the investigation into Russian interference. Now, they write, prior to departing for Florida in Mar-a-Lago, where he would be spending the weekend, Trump convened on Friday a group of senior aides in the Oval Office, including Chief of Staff Reince Priebus, Senior Advisor Jared Kushner, Ivanka Trump, Steve Bannon, and Mike Dubke, and, of course, Press Secretary Sean Spicer. Now, the meeting, Politico writes, got a little heated once it turned to the topic of Jeff Sessions. Now, what Trump wanted to know what was the logic of the move, of him recusing himself, because it makes him look bad, right? The president made it clear that he thought the whole thing had been handled poorly and that Sessions shouldn't have recused himself. His exasperation was apparent. At one point, Trump addressed White House counsel Don McGahn, who was in the room, said directly and said he was unhappy about the turn of events. There were, quote, fireworks, said one person briefed at the events. So, look, this is an indication that obviously he was very unhappy with that decision, especially since earlier that day he came out and said, we are 100% behind Jeff Sessions. He will not recuse himself. Oh, look, he just recused himself. Fuck, we look stupid. So that's what happened there. Now, in fact, during one conversation with an associate on Friday, he expressed concern that Sessions recusing himself made him, quote, made it seem like he had done something wrong. And of course, Donald Trump, he hates to give ground and he hates to admit making any mistakes. That's not his thing. Now, that's the account from Politico, which seems rather nice. Now, ABC News also had a source which summed it up a little differently. Trump was said to have, quote, gone ballistic before heading off to his winter White House in Florida, summoning some of his senior staff into the Oval Office. Trump fumed, reportedly, over reports on his administration's relationship with Russia. ABC News' source noted that Trump's son-in-law and senior advisor Jared Kushner and Ivanka were in attendance during this reported rage session. Rage session. I love it. As were, of course, Chief of Staff Reince Priebus, Bannon, Don McGahn, and, of course, Sean Spicer. Now, this was described as, quote, an animated exchange, and apparently a plan-altering one as well. Since after the meeting, normally Bannon and Priebus, well, they tend to go to Mar-a-Lago with him. At this point, they did not. He was very, very angry. Now, one source said both men had volunteered to stay behind, with another source saying that the president seemed to concur that they should. Sidelining key staffers with whom he was angry was an occasional Trump tactic during the campaign. Now, as President Trump was in the air aboard Marine One, heading for Air Force One, a last-minute phone call was made from the West Wing to the team on board of the president's plane with a directive to remove Priebus and Bannon from the manifest. They would not be coming to Mar-a-Lago. So, okay, Bannon, Priebus, gone. Fascinating. He's not taking them to Mar-a-Lago. They are not going to the Winter White House. That's how you can tell he's a little angry. All right. Now, actually, this is where Washington Post picks up the story. They write, upon reaching Mar-a-Lago, Trump was reportedly, quote, mad, steaming, raging mad. So you can tell the difference between the three different publications here. One was like, oh, well, it was a little bit of fireworks, a little heated, and then it goes to mad, steaming, raging mad. And these are all from different sources inside of the White House, with some obviously playing it up, and some seems to be playing it down. Interesting. Now, they also write that when Trump ran into Christopher Ruddy on the golf course, and by the way, Christopher Ruddy is a right-wing, he's the CEO of Newsmax, which is a very right-wing publication and a friend of Donald Trump. Now, he talked to the Washington Post and said that when Trump ran into him on the golf course and later at dinner on Saturday, he vented, saying, quote, on President Obama, this will be investigated. It will all come out. I will be proven right. Now, this, of course, is related to that tweet storm that he did on Saturday, accusing President Obama of tapping his phones based on a story from Breitbart and InfoWars. Now, that's right. So this is where he's getting his information. He's getting his information from InfoWars. He's listening to somebody who says things like this.
It is an alien force, not of this world. It's not human intelligence.
I mean, seriously, that's what we have.
I want to go to space. I want to see interdimensional travel.
This is the guy, okay, Alex Jones, who's crazy, who talks about aliens and Satan.
It's the devil, okay?
Okay, he literally thinks we're under assault by the aliens that are also in league with the devil. This guy's crazy pants, and yet the President of the United States listens to this guy. No, insanity. And of course they come up with this huge conspiracy theory, which does have a kernel of truth to it, to be honest, as a lot of conspiracy theories start out with having some little element of truth and then taken to extremes. And the whole issue of the wiretapping is, well, either a FISA court thought that it was that they had a case to tap Trump Tower, to tap the lines, or President Obama was doing it illegally. Both things are, I suppose, are possible. And there would have to be an investigation. There would have to be some facts on it. And you know who could look up those facts? The President of the United States. He would have access to those files. He would have access to that information as president. So if anybody could find out if this is true or not, it would be Donald Trump. Fascinating. But anyway, back to Ruddy. Now, when he was talking to Trump, he noted that Trump was, quote, pissed. I haven't seen him this angry. So this is from a friend. Okay. So, look, and it's not just about the Obama administration possibly tapping his phones. It's also about the news coverage following what he perceived as a successful speech for the joint session of Congress. So, in fact, the Post also writes up this. The merriment after Tuesday's speech came to a sudden end on Wednesday night, when the Washington Post first reported that the Attorney General, Jeff Sessions, had met with the Russian ambassador, despite having said under oath at the Senate confirmation hearing that he had no contact with the Russians. The next morning, Trump reportedly exploded, according to White House officials. He headed to Newport News, Virginia on Thursday for a commander-in-chief moment. The president would trumpet his plan to grow military spending aboard the Navy's sophisticated new aircraft carrier. But as Trump, sporting a bomber jacket and a Navy cap, rallied sailors and shipbuilders, his message was overshadowed by Sessions. And that goes to the point. Overshadowed by Sessions. I don't like being overshadowed by my staff. No, how dare you overshadow me? I'm the president. I'm the president of the United States. Child. Baby. Sad. And look, speaking of sad, it is a little sad and disrespectful for somebody who didn't serve in the Navy to be sporting the jacket and the cap. I'm just saying. Especially somebody who got 5 deferments from active duty and then claimed to have bone spurs. Seriously. Now, okay. So again, basically the whole issue here is that Trump was super angry that his speech was no longer the focus of the news, but instead Jeff Sessions. Now, he got pissed, flew off to Mar-a-Lago without Bannon and Priebus, which, by the way, Bannon, well, he can't just stay out of the action. Bannon took his own flight down to Florida and actually arrived on Saturday. And again, this is where the Post picks it up. Now, since Donald Trump was so angry, he was fuming at this, well, Bannon and some of the other advisors had to get together to make him feel a little better. Quote, that night at Mar-a-Lago, Trump had dinner with Sessions, Bannon, Homeland Security Secretary John F. Kelly, and White House Senior Policy Advisor Stephen Miller, among others. They tried to put Trump in a better mood by going over their implementation, plans for the travel ban, according to a White House official. So basically what they did, oh, Donnie, are you upset? Are you, here, I know you're mad. I know you're mad. Here, look at this distraction. Look, squirrel. And of course, like a child, it actually kind of worked, at least for a little bit. The Post writes, Trump was brighter Sunday morning as he read several newspaper pleas that his allegations against Obama happen to be the dominant story. Because it is a big story. And again, he has to have the attention, right? Because he's a narcissist. And like a narcissist, he gets mad when people don't pay attention to him or don't defend him. Quote, he found a reason to be mad again. Few Republicans were defending him on the Sunday political talk shows. Now remember, this guy watches 6 hours of TV a day while he's supposed to be working and being the president. No, he's too worried about, are they not defending me enough? Republicans, you got to defend me. I'm the president. Why aren't you out there defending me? I am so angry with you. He cares more about, hey, Republicans aren't out there defending me and my accusations than doing his job. It's amazing. And not only that, but look, when they do this, they have to treat him as if he's a child because he acts like a child. He is a child. Throwing a temper tantrum when he doesn't get enough positive attention, and what, of course, leakers of the press tell us what's actually going on. Because, again, part of his anger, too, is these continuous leaks, and, of course, that's how we get a lot of these stories. And, look, it's not just one leaker, but it's actually 17 different leakers that have talked to the press. Fascinating. Look, this administration, this is a disaster. When you have that many people going out there and leaking to the press about how dysfunctional your administration is, you know that it's not going to last. This is a house of cards waiting to blow over. The question is, how long will it last? And when it goes down, how much damage is it actually going to do? Only time will tell, but I can tell you this, we're not winning. It's going to be a disaster. Sad. We've got more. So, we do have more. And I do notice people are talking about WikiLeaks, Vault 7. I'm going to talk about that tomorrow when I've studied it a little bit more. So, I'm not leaving it out. I just need more time to take a look at it. All right. So let's roll into the next story. Let's have a little fun with Ben Carson. Now, of course, Ben Carson gets himself into trouble on his first day of the job. Now, while speaking to HUD employees on his first full day, Ben Carson said something incredibly controversial during what was supposed to be an actually pretty decent speech about opportunity. Let's take a listen to this.
That's what America is about. A land of dreams and opportunity. There were other immigrants who came here in the bottom of slave ships, worked even longer, even harder for less. But they too had a dream that one day their sons, daughters, grandsons, granddaughters, great-grandsons, great-granddaughters might pursue prosperity and happiness in this land.
Okay, so that was more than enough to almost put me to sleep. Look, to be fair to Ben Carson, yes, it was actually a decent speech. I can understand what he's trying to say. He's talking about opportunity, but holy shit, he is not the smartest guy in the world, and you can tell by that. I mean, he's literally ruined the joke of, hey, well, look, hey, it's not brain surgery, right? How hard could it be? Well, apparently, not so hard if you're Ben Carson. The guy may have gifted hands, but not so gifted when it comes to knowledge of history. Basically, if you heard him, he said slaves were immigrants who worked harder for less. No. They didn't get less. They got nothing. Because they were slaves. Slaves get nothing. That's why we call them slaves. Not immigrants, by the way. And look, not only that, but look, the people there in the slave ships were not over here to try and get opportunity in America. Pretty sure that they were busy enough seeking opportunity where they were at before they were hauled over here in chains. They didn't want to come here at all. In fact, they were forced to. And of course, they had dreams of prosperity for their children and grandchildren. That didn't involve being dragged over here, whipped and beaten and killed, and for the women, raped and to have their children ripped away from them and sold at auction. No, what Ben Carson just did is literally whitewashed the horrors of slavery by calling them immigrants who worked a little harder than everyone else for a little bit less. That's what's going on here. I mean, look, the rest of that speech, yeah, it's normal stuff. It's normal, hey, America, opportunity, all that stuff. Yeah, okay, that was fine, but the rest of it, I'm sorry, but that part, super dumb. Super dumb. Now, of course, after he said that, social media blew the fuck up, man. You had everybody out there going, what the hell was he talking about? Immigrants? Slaves were immigrants? You've got to be kidding me. Now, yesterday, actually earlier today, Carson addressed that by saying, you know what? No, I'm right. I'm going to double down on this. Speaking on Sirius XM radio with his friend Armstrong Williams, Carson said, quote, I think people need to actually look up the word immigrant. Whether you're voluntary or involuntary, if you come from the outside to the inside, you're an immigrant. Whether you're legal or illegal, you come from the outside to inside, you're an immigrant. Slaves just happen to come here as involuntary immigrants, but they still had the strength to hold on. Again, I get what he's trying to say, but boy, disaster. Why say things like they worked harder for less? You know why? That minimizes the horrors of slavery. It's almost like saying Jim Crow wasn't that big of a deal because, hey, look, at least we had our own fountain. It was our fountain. Maybe it was a couple of steps away from the white fountain, but what are you guys complaining about? Hey, look, the back of the bus is just as comfortable as the front of the bus. Why are we complaining? You kind of missed the point there, Ben. Just a little bit. In fact, one woman who called into the show actually disagreed with Carson. She said, quote, you can't be an immigrant if you're brought over here in chains. And that's exactly what we're trying to say. It's not necessarily an immigrant. And Carson responded, yes, you can be an involuntary immigrant. And continued by saying, we should be proud to have ancestors that have had the mental strength to endure what so many others had not been able to endure. They had tried to enslave all kinds of people, but they were not able to survive it, and that requires a tremendous amount of toughness and willpower and strength and hope, and they had that. Don't let someone turn that into something bad. Now look, no one here is trying to say that they didn't have an extraordinary strength to survive that hundreds of years of enslavement and torture and all the injustice that came after it. What people are pointing out here, Ben, is that you can't go and just say things like they worked a little harder and made a little less, and we're just immigrants here with dreams. That implies that they actually wanted to come here. Involuntary immigrant. It sounds the whole language of this blunts the horrors that happened under slavery and under the subsequent laws of Jim Crow and still the racial issues that are going on today. Look, dreams, their dreams, and I'm sure they had them, were crushed by the slavers that forcibly brought these people to America to work on their plantations for someone else's monetary benefit. I feel like calling it immigration takes away from the level of that injustice. It's sort of like Texas school books that once called slaves workers. It is outrageous because, yes, they might be technically workers, but the whole purpose of that is to make this seem more palatable. And I'm sorry, that is something that we just cannot abide by. No, you can't say things like this. That's ridiculous. You need to be factual on this and expose the horrors of slavery for what they really are, and to never forget that we once owned other human beings. And the reason that we don't want to forget about that is so that we never do it again. Okay. Speaking of modern day slavery, this is about as close to it as you can get. Let's talk about the prison system. All right. A new study out confirms what we pretty much already knew and suspected, that African Americans are more likely to be wrongfully convicted of crimes that they did not commit. Now, the study essentially looked at convictions of crimes such as murder, sexual assault, and illegal drug activity, and found that they were convicted more often than white Americans, African Americans were, due to factors including racial bias and official misconduct. Now, this study was, of course, done by the National Registry of Exonerations, so they would know a little bit about this topic. Now, what they did is they examined cases from 1989 to October of 2016, and they looked at the number of exonerations for African Americans compared to that of white people. Now, one of the amazing findings by the study found that of the 1,900 defendants convicted of crimes and later on exonerated, 47% of them were African Americans. That is nearly half. Now, what's interesting is that that is 3 times the representation of the entire population. So they are a disproportionate share of people that are being exonerated for crimes. That also means that they're the main share of people getting convicted for crimes that they did not commit. Wow. And again, in America, we seem to have this problem of incarcerating African Americans at a rate that is far disproportionate to their population, the share of population. And now the study is also pointing out that they are targeted simply because of the fact that they are African American. Now, the study found that they were about 7 times more likely to be wrongfully convicted of murder than white Americans. I mean, think about the story of the Central Park 5. This was a rape. This was obviously a rape murder case, but still, a lot of people thought that they were guilty long after they were actually proven to be innocent later on. And a lot of people went to prison for that, for crimes that they didn't commit. Now, Samuel Gross, who is a University of Michigan Law School professor who is a senior editor of the group that tracks exonerations in U.S. prisons, said, quote, "In the murder cases we examined, the rate of official misconduct is considerably higher in cases where the defendant is African American compared to cases where the defendant is white." Now, basically, what he's saying is that they make more mistakes, or either intentionally or unintentionally, and that ends up getting these African Americans put wrongfully into prison. So, I mean, if that, that might mean not gathering enough evidence, not putting enough time into investigation, which has the effect of not actually going after and punishing the real criminals. And of course, the other effect is you end up with more black people going into the prison system who don't belong there. Basically, Gross also said that this is partly unconscious bias, institutional discrimination, and explicit racism were factors in these wrongful convictions. Now, that whole bias and stereotyping thing, of course it strikes again. I mean, where people will see a young black male and think, oh, he looks like a thug. He's wearing a hoodie. I mean, look at him. That guy looks dangerous. He's shifty, man. He could be part of a gang or something. We don't know. So is it possible that he could have done a crime? Yeah. So that's what a lot of people unfortunately think, thanks to some stereotyping. And this, of course, is baked into the system. These stereotypes continue to be perpetrated. And, of course, spread by right-wing propaganda. They'll point out things like thug culture and rap music as evidence that they are correct, that they are right. And so that is wrong. That is absolutely wrong. And I don't know if you know this, but young white males also get into trouble. Young white males, I mean, look, there's a lot of people that want to point out in this study that, well, what about young white men being put into the prison system? Look, there's also a problem with just imprisoning poor people. I mean, we have the return of debtors' prisons in some states, and, you know, the war on drugs, of course, it affects everybody. But again, it's disproportionately affecting African Americans. And I don't think it has anything to do with being put into prison with being a certain race or color. Really, I mean, when it comes to committing crime, I mean, it's got more to do with being young and stupid and doing dumb things. So that's what's going on here. Now, the study also talked about drug crimes. Now, it points out that black Americans are about 12 times more likely to be wrongfully convicted than innocent white people when it comes to things like possession and drug dealing. Now, there's also been the issue of some crooked police officers planting drugs in order to make arrests. I mean, they say they don't have a quota. They have a quota. A separate study from the same group, also released on Tuesday, showed that 2016 set a record for known exonerations in the United States since 1989 at 166, up from 160 cases in 2015. So, interestingly enough, nearly 60 of the exonerations came from the state of Texas. That's the most of any state. So Texas seems to have a problem with throwing black people in prison, even though these people oftentimes end up being innocent. Disaster. Now, most of the, there are district attorneys now in these counties that include Houston and Dallas that have now, because of this, have set up integrity units to examine prosecutions for possible problems. I mean, because Texas seems to have more of a problem than anybody else does. And most of the Texas exonerations happen to be stemming from drug convictions in Harris County. That is, of course, home to Houston. In many of the cases, suspects pleaded guilty to drug possession, and months or years later, reports from the crime lab show that seized material contained no controlled substances. That's very, very interesting. And I think part of that is because these people end up getting pressured to confess for a crime that they haven't committed. Now, nationwide, 52 defendants were exonerated of murder and 73 were exonerated of nonviolent crimes, such as drug possession. Now, interestingly enough, after Texas, Illinois had the most exonerations in 2016 at 16 of them, followed by New York with 14 and California with 9. So again, this whole stuff, this whole thing is we already kind of knew this. We knew this was happening. However, it seems to be good to, it's pretty good to know that we have the facts so that maybe we can actually solve this problem. And part of it, as the study points out, the problem is institutional and outright racism. Then, of course, there are financial incentives because of the uses of private prisons, which incentivize us to pass tough on crime laws, which is another problem, and continue the war on drugs in order to do shareholder profit. When you start putting a profit motive in putting people in prison, well, what do you think they're going to do? They're going to do what they can. They're going to use that profit to lobby in order to get tougher laws so they can put even more people into prison. That's what's going on. It's disgusting. And of course, you have implicit bias as well. that ends up getting more people into trouble. Again, oh well, he fits the profile of a criminal. Well, why is that? Well, he's black, he's intimidating, he's scary, he's wearing a hoodie. Of course it has to be the guy. That's the stuff that we have to fix, man. And until we do fix this stuff, innocent people will continue to go to prison for vast stretches at a time. And where I come from, that's not justice. That is plain wrong. All right. I got one more story for you guys to get through. Let's talk minimum wage. Now, back in January, Maine voters had voted on a statewide referendum to raise the state's minimum wage for tipped workers. Now, tipped workers generally, of course, make lower than the minimum wage, but are supplemented by tips. Now, in Maine, the base wage for those workers had been voted to increase from $3.75 an hour to $5 an hour. And under this new law, they would be able to see gradual increases over the next decade until it reaches the full minimum wage. So this is actually a very progressive law that was put into place in Maine. This is what the voters wanted. They voted for this. They wanted this. They made it quite clear that this was something the majority of Mainers actually support. Now, Republican Governor Paul LePage, however, does not support this bill, and he's actually been on the warpath against it, along with other Republicans. Basically, he believes that working people doing these tip jobs should not make that much money. They should make less money. And sadly, there are some Democrats that have agreed and have signed on to this bill to reduce that wage, to overturn the will of the voters. Now, if you live in Maine, you might want to get a pen, because I'm going to tell you the Democrats who voted with the Republicans to eliminate your minimum wage increase, the one that you voted for, the one that you wanted. This is Senator Bill Diamond of Cumberland County, Senator Jim Dill of Penobscot County, Robert Alley of Beals, Martin Groman of Biddeford, Brian Hubble of Bar Harbor, Louis Lucchini of Ellsworth, Anne Marie Mastraccio of Sanford, and Catherine Nadeau of Winslow. So these are the politicians, these are the Democrats that voted against your minimum wage increase. These are the ones that sided with the Republicans that didn't give a damn about your vote. Now, in case you're wondering just how many Mainers supported this bill, according to the Maine Beacon, the minimum wage increase passed with more than 420,000 votes in November. That is more than any previous citizen initiative in the history of Maine. The people wanted this. They got it passed. To put this in context, more Mainers cast their ballots on this issue than they did their vote for president. This seems to be an issue that is pretty damn important to people in Maine. And of course, it's important across the country. There are 7 states right now, Alaska, California, Minnesota, Montana, Nevada, Oregon, and Washington, that no longer have what is called a sub-minimum wage. That is a different wage for tipped workers. The minimum wage is the minimum wage. Meaning what they have done, what Maine passed in January, trying to bring the wages for tipped workers up to that state minimum wage. Why would they want to do that? Because that brings a lot of people out of poverty. In fact, the biggest group of people helped by this would be women, who make up 79% of the workforce who collect tipped wages. Now, there's opponents to this, of course, that claim it's going to cost more. People are going to stop tipping. The restaurant industry will collapse. Oh, it's going to be horrible. All the restaurants are going to leave. They're gone. And where are they going to go? They're not just going to pick up and leave. That is ridiculous. In those 7 states that I mentioned, Alaska, California, Minnesota, Montana, Nevada, Oregon, and Washington, the restaurant industry is actually incredibly strong. Oh, but what about the menu prices? It's going to be so much more expensive if you raise the minimum wage in these restaurants. Well, those menu prices are actually not higher than they are in other states And as far as tipping goes, well, customers haven't stopped tipping. So this is all benefit to the workers, and almost none of the downsides for any of the restaurant industry, except for, of course, having to be to pay a higher wage. Now, in Maine, we would end up seeing the same result. However, there are restaurant owners there that are so scared of actually making sure that their workers are taken care of that they will end up buying off local politicians like these Democrats in an attempt to repeal the will of the people. They care only about their bottom line. They care only about their profit. And let me tell you, if you could buy a politician, you can afford to pay a fair wage for tip workers who are right now overwhelmingly languishing in poverty. In fact, according to Amy Halstead, campaign manager for Mainers for Fair Wages, quote, they are twice as likely to live in poverty and 3 times as likely to access food stamps to feed their families. Now, I've said before, food stamps right now is essentially a subsidy to these employers. If you're doing a restaurant job, if you're working 40 hours a week, if you're doing a tip job, there's no reason for you to have to rely on food stamps. Your employer should pay you enough for you to be able to live on your own and take care of yourself and not have to rely off the government. So these companies that are exploiting low wages, they're essentially being subsidized by the taxpayer. We're paying them so that these companies don't have to. That, my friends, that is corporate welfare. We are all against that. Now, Amy Halstead continues by saying, these legislators need to hear from us right now about not betraying the will of the voters and not cutting this minimum wage. The workers want it. The people want it. They voted for it. And these politicians should not get away. They should not be allowed to cut it. All right, that's it. That's all I got. I want to thank you guys for watching. I want to thank FYI Nation, of course, for listening. I'm going to let you guys go. Catch me tomorrow. Same time, same place, right here, TYT Nation, or FYI Nation as well, if you're into the whole podcast thing. So thank you, FYI Nation. We'll see you guys tomorrow. Same time, same place. As far as the rest of you on the live stream, right here, you can catch me at this time from 3 to 4 tomorrow. We're going to have a good show. We're going to talk a little bit about Vault 7. I'm going to try to break that down for you the best that I can, because it's some complicated stuff that I was already reading into before the show. So we're going to do that. We're going to have that. It's going to be a good show. Of course, thanking the patrons. Thank you so much. You guys and gals are awesome. Thank you for helping make sure that we continue to be independent, progressive media. Thank you so much for people in the chat. Thank you for watching at home. Make sure to like and share these videos if you haven't already. Please subscribe to this channel. Help us get to 50,000. I'm hoping within the next month. So we're growing. We're kicking ass. And it's all thanks to you guys. So with that, love you guys. We'll see you tomorrow. And remember, change begins with you. Good night, TYT Nation.